Has the US government's plan for a strategic Bitcoin reserve just collapsed? A recent Freedom of Information request has revealed a shocking lack of progress, sending a wave of confusion through the market. Some are calling it a bureaucratic failure. Others believe it's a sign the entire project was dead on arrival. But what if I told you the real story is far more complex, and that the biggest revelation isn't what the government hasn't done, but what it doesn't have?
The government?
The government.
My name is Nick, and you're watching The Coin Bureau. First up though, I am not a financial advisor, and nothing in this video should be considered financial advice. This is educational content meant to inform you about the latest developments surrounding the US Strategic Bitcoin Reserve and their potential impact. If that sounds good to you, hit those like and subscribe buttons, and let's get into it. Now, to understand where we're going, you first have to understand the entire SBR saga, from its hype-filled announcement to this recent letdown. It all began in July 2024. At the Bitcoin 2024 conference, Donald Trump announced his intention to establish a national Bitcoin reserve if elected. Just days later, Senator Cynthia Lummis introduced the Bitcoin Act, a groundbreaking bill proposing the purchase of 1 million BTC for this new reserve. The vision was for the United States to hold approximately 5% of the total Bitcoin supply, mirroring the scale of its strategic gold reserves. Fast forward to March 2025, and President Trump made good on his promise, signing an executive order to establish the strategic Bitcoin reserve. The market initially surged, with BTC jumping from nearly $85,000 to over $94,000 in a matter of hours. But then came the details and the disappointment. The reserve would only be funded by BTC the government had already seized through criminal and civil forfeiture cases. There were no plans for the US government to actively buy more of it, and the market reversed sharply. In fact, the volatility created the largest CME futures gap in history, a staggering $10,350. The message was clear. The market had hoped for a massive new buyer, and instead it got an accounting change. And this brings us to the recent bombshell disclosure. The March executive order required all federal agencies to report on their authority to transfer seized assets to the new stockpile. Those reports were due to the Treasury on April 5, 2025, but a Freedom of Information request revealed that 6 months later, the Treasury still doesn't have them. In response, the Treasury directed inquiries to the individual agencies like the IRS and the Secret Service. And this isn't a policy reversal, it's a bureaucratic inertia, a sign that the administration is struggling with the simple task of getting its own house in order. But here's the real kicker. The story gets even stranger. A separate FOIA request to the US Marshal Service, the agency responsible for handling seized assets, revealed that they hold just 28,988 Bitcoin, worth around $3.3 billion. The number is a shocking 86% lower than the widely cited figure of over 200,000 BTC, which blockchain analytics firm Arkham Intelligence tracks across all government wallets. And this discrepancy has created massive confusion. Has the government quietly sold off the majority of its Bitcoin? Or are the assets simply spread across various agencies that are failing to report back to the Treasury? The lack of clarity has been toxic for market sentiment, a fact made worse by confusing statements from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent himself. In a television interview, he stated that the US would not be buying Bitcoin for its reserve, which triggered an immediate market sell-off, sending Bitcoin from $121,000 down to $118,000 in under an hour. He later walked back those comments on X, clarifying that the Treasury is exploring, quote, budget-neutral pathways to acquire more Bitcoin. It's a textbook case of mixed messaging creating uncertainty. And if you want to make the most of that uncertainty and volatility, then you need an exchange to do it. How does a $20,000 in sign-up bonuses sound? Or how about the new iPhone giveaway? Well, we have an amazing competition right now with BitGet, a top-tier global exchange with all the features and coin support that you need. If you sign up and create an account right now using this QR code over here or the link in the description, not only will you be able to take advantage of over $20,000 in sign-up bonuses, but You will also be entered into a competition to win a brand new iPhone. The winner will be announced on one of our Monday live streams, so sign up right now while this competition is still on, as it won't be around for long. So, with all the chaos, is the dream of the fully funded strategic Bitcoin reserve still alive? Well, that depends on Congress. Senator Cynthia Lummis's Bitcoin Act of 2025 goes far beyond the executive order. It would enshrine the reserve into law, making it permanent, and more importantly, it would mandate the purchase of 200,000 Bitcoin per year for 5 years. Now, to put that into perspective, post-halving, only about 164,000 new Bitcoin are mined every year. This bill would force the US government to absorb more than the entire supply, creating a monumental supply shock. But what are the chances of this passing? Well, the political landscape is favorable. Pro-crypto Republicans now chair the key banking committees in both the House and the Senate. And the crypto industry's lobbying arm, Fair Shake PAC, has raised over $116 million for the 2026 elections. However, the statistical reality is brutal. According to govtrack.us, the bill has just a 1% chance of being enacted. It faces a wall of Democratic opposition from figures like Maxine Waters and Elizabeth Warren. And as of now, it has zero bipartisan support. And this brings us to the bigger narrative battle playing out among the experts. On the one side, you have the bulls, like Michael Saylor. He's actively lobbying for the bill in Washington, arguing a fully funded SPR would create up to $81 trillion for the Treasury, enough to offset the entire national debt. Kathy Wood of ARK Invest also sees it as a major catalyst, helping to drive her firm's bull case of $3.8 million per Bitcoin by 2030. But on the other side, the skepticism is profound. In a February 2025 survey by the University of Chicago, not a single economist agreed that creating a strategic crypto reserve would benefit the US economy. Critics argue that it's a solution in search of a problem, a political maneuver that contradicts the very ethos of a decentralized asset. Which brings us to the most important philosophical question: does Bitcoin even need a government reserve? For Bitcoin purists, the answer is a resounding no. They argue that government accumulation is a vector of centralization, a Trojan horse that threatens Bitcoin's core value proposition of operating outside of the traditional system. Solana co-founder Anatoly Yakovenko summed it up perfectly when he said, quote, "If you want decentralization to fail, you'd put the government in charge of it." And here's the thing. He might be right. Bitcoin's fundamentals are strengthening, completely independent of government action. The spot Bitcoin ETFs have been a monumental success, attracting over $55 billion in cumulative net inflows. Meanwhile, on-chain, the picture is even more bullish. A staggering 74% of all Bitcoin is now considered illiquid, meaning it hasn't moved in over 155 days. And this is long-term holders refusing to sell, creating an intense supply squeeze. This isn't government policy. This is a structural shift in how the world's largest pools of private capital view this asset class. So, what could all of this mean for the price of Bitcoin going forward? Well, we're now facing two very distinct potential futures. In the first scenario, the administrative hurdles are cleared and Congress, against the odds, passes a version of the Bitcoin Act. The resulting supply shock from government buying would be unprecedented. In this environment, forecasts from analysts at Bernstein calling for a $200,000 Bitcoin by the end of 2025 seem not just possible, but perhaps even conservative. In the second scenario, the SPR remains a paper reserve, funded only by existing seized assets. The narrative catalyst is gone. In this world, Bitcoin's fate rests entirely on the shoulders of ETF inflows and the corporate treasury demand. While still bullish long-term, it leaves the market vulnerable to corrections. Analysts have identified the $70,000 to $75,000 range as a critical support zone in a worst-case scenario where macroeconomic headwinds pick up. Right now, the market is caught in the middle, with the price consolidating between $110,000 and $117,000, waiting for the next major signal. So, to recap, the ambitious plan for the US Strategic Bitcoin Reserve began with a grand promise, but has since slammed into a wall of bureaucratic delay, market disappointment, and political gridlock. The recent FOIA disclosures revealed not a deliberate policy failure, but administrative chaos and a major discrepancy in what we thought the government actually holds. While legislation to mandate Bitcoin purchases remains a steep uphill battle, the expert community remains deeply divided on whether it's a necessary catalyst or a dangerous distraction. The ultimate bull case for Bitcoin, however, may not even need it. The path of least resistance still appears to be higher, thanks to powerful on-chain fundamentals and relentless institutional adoption that is happening with or without Washington's help. The SBR narrative has shifted from guaranteed rocket fuel to a political wildcard. The key now is recognizing that this recent disappointment, while painful, may simply be clearing the way for a more sustainable private sector-led rally. And do we really want governments interfering anyway?
Of course not.
Of course not.
Of course not.
Okay, if you want to see our deep dive into the corporate treasury companies that are buying up altcoins, then you can check out our video on that right over here. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, well, you can do that right over here. As always, thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Over and out.